Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We're going to give folks just another moment to log in, and we will be starting soon. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Better Building Summer webinar series. This series is dedicated to bringing you the latest actionable insights from leading industry experts. It's a chance to explore topics, technologies, and trends that affect your organization, and we're also hoping to accelerate decarbonization and energy efficiency adoption. Next slide. Okay, so if you are here today for the next big thing, HVAC control technology for small to medium commercial buildings, you are in the right place. Before we dive in, I just want to go over a few housekeeping points. Please note that today's webinar, it will be recorded and archived on the Better Building Solutions Center. We will follow up when today's recording and slides are made available. Next, attendees are in listen-only mode, meaning your microphone is muted. If you experience any audio or visual issues throughout the webinar, please send a message in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and someone can help you out. Okay, next slide. So I am Nora Hart. I am the moderator today. I work for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and I work on the Smarter Small Buildings campaign that we'll be talking about in just a couple slides. Next slide. Okay, so here is the agenda for today. I'm going to introduce our great speakers. I'll talk to you a little bit about the Smarter Small Buildings campaign. And then we have Annie Seacrest, who will be talking about choosing a product for small building controls. And then Devin Messerschmidt will be talking about how to use data to drive savings in small buildings. And finally, we will have a Q&A portion at the end. Next slide. Okay, today we will be using an interactive platform for Q&A and polling. Please go to slido.com on your mobile device or by opening a new window in your internet browser. Today's event code is #hashtag, whichever you prefer, DOE. And if you would like to ask our speakers questions, please submit them anytime throughout the presentation. We'll be answering your questions near the end of the webinar. And if you can select a thumbs up icon for questions that you like, which will result in the most popular questions moving to the top. And I'll do my best to get to all of those great questions that I'm sure you'll have. Okay, next slide. So if you didn't already go to Slido, please go there now because we want to start off with a few polls. So join us over there and we have just a couple questions. Like I said, if you're having any issues, please message our tech support team by using the Zoom Q&A function. So this first question is just to get a sense of where everyone is, kind of a little icebreaker. So I wanted to know where everyone is tuning in from. And we have this word cloud here. This is my first word cloud on a webinar, so I'm very excited about it. So you can see we have quite a few from California, New York, Colorado. Wow, we have people from all over. This is great. North Carolina. I am actually sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina right now. So shout out to my North Carolina folks. Let's see, where else? DC, Alabama. This is great. Canada. Okay. All right. Well, that was a fun word cloud. It looks like California and New York are dominating just a little bit. But now we'll just move on to the next poll. So the next question is, what sector best describes your organization? I'll give just a couple minutes for the bars to kind of slow down so we can see who all is attending today. Okay, we have a lot of other. Now I'm wondering who those others are. We'll have to dive into that a little bit. A lot of state and local government. Okay, interesting. Looks like it's slowing down just a little bit. Well, we do have a speaker from state and local government and a speaker from retail, food service, grocery to give some information today. All right, let's move on to our next poll. So this next poll is, does your organization have small to medium-sized buildings within the building portfolio? And when we say small to medium, we're talking about buildings with rooftop units less than 50,000 square feet. Okay, great. I was hoping there would be a lot of yeses. 83%. That's good to know. And even if you don't, I still think there are lessons you can learn for larger buildings in your portfolio. Okay, with that, I think we can go back to the slides. Now I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have two great speakers today. We have Annie Seacrest. Annie is the Energy and Water Coordinator for the County of San Luis Obispo. In this role, she manages the municipal energy portfolio, which includes developing energy efficiency and distributed energy resource projects. Annie has a master's degree in environmental science from Cal State Fullerton and a bachelor's degree in environmental science and policy from Cal State Long Beach. We also have Devin today. Devin Messerschmidt is an energy engineer for Sheets. In this role, he manages energy efficiency projects, analyzes equipment energy data, and manages the rebate program. Devin has a bachelor's degree in energy engineering from Penn State. And if you're on the East Coast like I am, you have probably seen a Sheets and you might have stopped at one on a road trip. Next slide. All right, as I said before, our topic today is focusing on the Smarter Small Buildings campaign, of which both Annie and Devin are participants in the campaign. This campaign is an initiative that's run by Berkeley Lab, which is where I work, with support from the U.S. Department of Energy. The goal of this campaign is to promote the implementation of controls and monitoring for small and medium buildings. And when we say small and medium, you can think of buildings less than 50,000 square feet or buildings that have packaged rooftop units. We work with building owners on this campaign, who we call participants, like Annie and Devin, and we also partner with vendors that work to offer products suited for rooftop units, along with contractors and utilities that want to support the effort. Next slide. You may be wondering why we're focusing on small buildings. Well, according to 2018 survey data from CBEX, which is the Commercial Buildings Energy Consumption Survey, 94% of commercial buildings are less than 50,000 square feet, and only 5% of those have thermostats. So if you see this picture we have over here on the left, this is more common than you think, or if you have a small building portfolio, you may know this is common to have a thermostat that doesn't communicate, maybe it doesn't work. This is a real photo of a thermostat out in the field. And typically small to medium buildings, they're not connected to a centralized building management system, meaning portfolio owners and operators, there's just not a clear picture of what's happening in these buildings, which can lead to energy waste and comfort issues. And oftentimes building without any visibility are running 24/7, and they generate a lot of energy waste. So there's a lot of opportunity in small buildings to install controls. And oftentimes in big portfolios, they get a lot less attention than those larger buildings. There's a lot of benefits. So you can save whole building energy savings of 10 to 20%. Controls can help improve occupant comfort and streamline maintenance. One of the biggest ways occupant comfort can be improved is by having remote visibility. You can fix issues before occupants even notice. Now, if I go back to the benefits of the campaign specifically, participants that join the campaign will receive free technical assistance and targeted resources, and there will be opportunities for recognition and peer exchange. So one example of peer exchange is that Annie, who will be speaking next, she is a participant in the campaign, And we were able to connect her with someone from University of California, Davis, who has rolled out their own small building controls program across their campus. So the UC Davis participant was able to share his experiences and answer Andy's specific questions about rolling out a similar program for the county. Over here on the right is actually a screenshot from the vendor platform that UC Davis uses on their small buildings. You can see here they have visibility into multiple thermostats in one of their campus buildings, and this is all from a phone. So they're able to control their thermostats across the building very easily. Next slide. And here I'm just highlighting how you can join the campaign if you're interested. You can send an email to ssbc-controls@lbl.gov, or you can go to our website, smartersmallbuildings.lbl.gov, and click join. If you just want to learn more before signing up, please send an email to that email address and we can set up a quick call to answer any of your questions. And with that, we'll go to the next slide and I'll hand it to Annie to kick us off.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and a very good early morning here from the West Coast. Thank you for being here today. My name is Annie Seacrest, and I'm going to talk about how our local government is approaching installing controls for our small facility rooftop units. Next slide. Okay, so to start, I'll give you some background on our organization. Our government is located within San Luis Obispo County, which is halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles on the central coast of California. Our county is very large. It spans 3,300 square land miles. I work for our county government, which is approximately 3,000 staff members spread across 24 departments. I'm in the Public Works Department, which provides public services to, among many things, facility planning and maintenance services for all county-occupied facilities. We have a skilled 23-member facility maintenance team that includes HVAC technicians, electricians, and more. Next slide. Our approach for finding a solution to gain visibility and control of small facility rooftop units is following the sequence listed on the slide, which I'll dig into on the next several slides as well. So to start, I gathered baseline data on our energy and worked with the building maintenance manager to gather a list of the facilities that we already had implemented controls at. Once we had our list together, it was time for us to determine what team we needed to make the project a success. Together, we were able to set our goals and interests for the project. From there, we created scoring materials based on our goals and preferences. We then sent the scoring materials to nearly 24 vendors. And now we are in the midst of scoring the forms, which will include vendors, follow-up discussions, and demonstrations. Once we have our top products selected, we will pilot them. And upon successful completion of the pilot, we will select one solution to scale to the rest of our small facilities. Next slide. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into each of those. We started with gathering our baseline data. Our total annual energy use across our municipal energy portfolio is around 21.5 million kilowatt hours, but a lot of that energy is used in moving and treating water. So once we less out that energy use, we have our building energy use, which is around 9.1 million kilowatt hours a year, represented by the periwinkle bar on the left. As may be true for your organization, our larger facilities already had advanced controls for rooftop units. So using the list that maintenance had that of facilities that already had controls installed, the center bar depicted in blue represents our controlled building energy use, which is around 2.5 million kilowatt hours a year. As a result, the cerulean colored bar on the right represents the 6.6 million kilowatt hour opportunity for us to better manage our energy use via networked rooftop controls. These facilities range anywhere from 100 to 30,000 square feet. Next slide. So we had the opportunity identified. Next, we formed our team. So I'm the county's energy coordinator and I am managing the initiative. However, this effort will not go far or even anywhere without the involvement of many others. Outlined in teal, you'll see the members of our team, which all happen to be from our public works department. From our facilities maintenance team, we have our buildings maintenance manager and a facilities supervisor who is also our resident HVAC expert. From our facilities planning division, which is the division I'm in, we have representation from our capital planning manager. We also have a software engineer from our IT division on the team. And rounding out the team is one of the department's deputy directors, who just happens to be the deputy for all 3 divisions represented on this team. We also have 2 entities that aren't involved in the daily tasks, but are very much part of the success of the project. And that is our organization's IT department, as well as Nora and the team at Berkeley Lab. Next slide. So once we had our team sorted out, it was time for us to set our expectations, goals, interests from each represented stakeholder. We developed a project charter to memorialize the stakeholder roles, the objective, scope, success metric, budget, so on and so forth. We then moved on to many meetings to establish what was important for each stakeholder. And with each stakeholder representing such different subject areas, our goals were broad and encompassing. Not to discredit anyone involved with the project, I prioritize our maintenance division's goals, as they're the ones who will have to interact daily with whatever solution we implement. Accordingly, they are in the solution, they're interested in the solution providing visibility, access, monitoring of rooftop control units. Our county is so large, 3,300 square miles, that a work order submission from one part of the county could necessitate a maintenance worker driving an hour to put eyes on the problem, an hour to drive back to order a part, another hour to drive back out to install the part, and then an hour to drive back to the maintenance headquarters. So as you can imagine, having any sort of advanced control capability could be a considerable time saver. The division that I'm in, facilities planning, plans for all of our facility and manages our energy portfolio. So our interests center around how to scale the solution and how much budget we need to do so effectively. Furthermore, like many states, California is very interested in consumers tapering their energy use during peak demand times. And I, as the energy coordinator, am very interested in the financial incentives the utilities offer to do so. Our IT team is instrumental in making sure that the solution can, 1, integrate with our facilities and IT protocols, and 2, doesn't put us in a compromising position as it relates to information security. And then lastly, our department's leadership is interested in reducing the amount of work orders related to rooftop units at facilities where the solution is installed. Next slide. So I just want to pause for a moment to acknowledge how this idea originated and the importance of learning from others. The impetus for this initiative within our organization stemmed from a presentation given by UC Davis and DOE at the 2022 ACEEE Summer Study on Energy Efficiency in Buildings Conference. I've had many conversations with UC Davis's staff that developed the program at their university. And UC Davis's team stressed the importance of picking the right product, which isn't necessarily the fanciest product. Simplicity in use and management was key for their team. Next slide. After our team was established and our goals were set, it was time for us to organize our materials into some sort of scoreable form, which took several iterations to get there. We have compiled all the reference materials from UC Davis, DOE, elsewhere, and created an Excel spreadsheet that categorized the various features and attributes of a potential solution. Collectively, we then assigned a value to those features and attributes. Was this something that the product needed to have, should have in the future, or is it simply just a value add feature? On the screen, you'll see some of the attributes that we wanted to evaluate, such as, was the solution mobile device friendly? So if a technician received an alert while he was in the field, he could view it on his smartphone. Next slide. We then organized and transformed that last slide, which was brainstorming notes, into something that allowed for scoring. We had two major sections of this form. We had product setup criteria and ranked criteria. Product setup criteria was something we would make subjective evaluations on. And as we'll see on the next screen, ranked criteria was objective. In the product setup criteria, we asked questions about the product's vendor services and support, the product setup, the cost. Some of these were yes, no answers, as in, is the system cloud-based? While other questions required narrative answers, such as, what does the product upgrade process look like? Next slide. So this is the ranked criteria section. And in this section, we provided 4 options for scores that vendors would self-assign a value to for their product: fully out of the box, partially provided out of the box, custom development required, or not available or unable to support. These values followed a successful evaluation process of an internal IT software evaluation. This section, as you can see, dug into the mechanical, energy, and reporting criteria. You can see some of the features we are interested in learning more about, which, if you recall from a couple slides ago, we assigned on the back end an importance value to. We understood this section would require the submitter to elaborate, so we provided space for comments. Next slide. So we had that form. We wanted to create a consistent, user-friendly form to send to vendors to collect our responses. So our IT team member created a Microsoft form that contained all of that same information as the scoring sheet that I showed you on the last 2 slides. The form was then sent to vendors last month that DOE had engaged with as part of the Smarter Small Buildings campaign, as well as sending to vendors we already had relationships with. The form contained links to external resources and had high-level information about our project. Next slide. Okay, I'm excited to share with you that out of the 20 contacts the form was sent to, we collected 15 responses, which was more than we are anticipating receiving. Our team meeting is next week to start evaluating the responses. And from there, we'll then move to collect more information from our top scoring vendors, including receiving demonstrations from products. After the demonstrations, we'll select our top products and then begin the pilot phase, which will include installing the solutions in a few of our facilities. From the pilot, we will determine one solution, which will then be budgeted for and scaled to the remaining facilities in subsequent years. Luckily, our organization has been really interested in this project and very supportive of it. So last fiscal year, our capital planning manager helped secure funding for this current fiscal year we're in, meaning we're ready to scale as soon as we find a solution that fits us. And lastly, we're also hoping to integrate occupant education as part of this effort. So thank you for your attention. I'm going to pass it now to Nora, who will inform you of some resources in case you're interested in going on a similar journey. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Annie. That was great. I really appreciate you sharing your story. Annie's team has done a really great job of getting their specifications together before installing a product. I think that's something really important that we encourage participants in the campaign to do, because maybe you're not ready to do demand response today, but you might want to make sure your product is capable of that in the future. Just things like that. So if you see on the screen here, I'm sharing some of the related resources that you can find on our website, smartersmallbuildings.lbl.gov. And Annie was part of the inspiration for these resources. I worked with her on determining what should be in here. And then we also worked with UC Davis to develop this product selection guidance. And Annie used that to help define those criteria that her team was requesting from vendors. And then the next resource on here is a product listing of products from controls vendors that focus on rooftop units. And if you go into this resource, you can see that we've grouped these different technologies according to a certain criteria to kind of help you understand what would be a good fit for your building. And so a lot of the vendors that are on this list are partners in the campaign. We've sent this out to many vendors. We would like to expand this. So if you have a product that is targeted for small to medium buildings and you're on this call, please reach out to us. You know, we are vendor agnostic. We're not promoting any vendors. We are just trying to help small building owners get the information they need to make a decision. Oftentimes, when you kind of just go to a website for a tool, it may be hard to get those details, which is why Annie and her team are sending out these forms to specific vendors. So I hope you guys will use those resources. If you have feedback on them, please reach out to the email. We are going to probably release a version 2 of these next year because we're constantly improving based on what we hear from our campaign participants. And so with that, I will pass it over to Devin Messerschmidt. And just a quick reminder, please put your questions in Slido. The event code is #DOE, and then we look forward to answering questions at the end. All right, take it away, Devin.
Thanks, Nora. Hello, everybody. I'm Devin Messerschmidt, Energy Engineer for Sheets, and I'll be talking about data utilization once the BMS is installed and operational. Next slide, please. So a little bit of information about Sheets. We are a convenience store that proudly serves customers in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina. Our goal is to provide customers with fast and friendly service and quality products in clean and convenient locations. Next slide, please. So a little bit of information about what our building management system does. So we control the HVAC and the economizers. They work hand in hand based on what the sensor readings are showing. That will go into the logic and make the decision if we want to cool, heat, dehumidify, or free cool. Our exterior lighting is set on the local sunrise, sunset times, but if it's an overcast day, we do have a photo cell that will turn on some security lights. And then we monitor refrigeration, energy use, and HVAC information. This gives us information such as temperatures, run times, and valuable information from the HVAC. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits that we've seen 10% average savings per site found across our portfolio. We have remote access to equipment data, allows for more insight and easier access. 80% of our HVAC calls come from the system, so now they're being found before anyone at the site even knows it's a problem. We're able to audit sites much quicker and more efficiently, and then any changes that we would like to do, whether it's temperature, humidity, anything along those lines, we're able to just push a button and it changes at all of our locations. Next slide, please. So then a little bit about our data flow. So our BMS speaks BACnet. That means any device that's connected to it must send it in BACnet. We have other languages in our equipment, but we use a converter. So that's just an important step in the data flow. So how our data actually flows, the readings are found at the sensors in our HVAC, refrigeration, electric submeters, and photocell. From there, it is sent to the on-site controller. And then from there, it goes to the BMS server, where we're able to have visualizations, trends, and everything along those lines. But then nightly, we have an export sent to our internal data warehouse. And then from there, we can use it in Tableau. At the Tableau point, we can combine it with other internal data, whether it's sales, marketing data, or other forms. Next slide, please. So this is our key auditing tool. We use this visualization to compare similar units across our portfolio against one another. We can compare based on energy use, zone temp, runtime, humidity, and other values. We use the box and whisker chart in the bottom left to find outliers. There's also different colored dots depending on what stage of the process they are in. We're able to sort sites based on location, such as state, configuration type, which is something that we group them into, the heating source, electric or natural gas, and then other factors that we deem important, such as square footage or tonnage that we have on the roof. Values for a specific site are found in the bottom right trends. We have different trends from run times of heating and cooling to dew point to economizer position, anything that we really think are important. In the top left, you can see our current maintenance calls. If we're auditing a site, we don't want to send out a ticket for something that's already currently being working on. So it's an extra check for us. And then we also have our energy use that we get directly from the BMS, and then our utility use for the last year when it comes to electric and natural gas, just to give us more insight at the site. Next slide, please. So this is a view of our visualizations through the actual BMS website. On the left, you can see our energy use, so we can get real-time demand. And then we also know how much energy we've used for the day or the month to date. On the right is the HVAC data, so we can see a lot of information on this. We have temperatures, humidity, whether stages are on or off, what our VFD fan speed is doing, our economizer position. And then everything on these 2 pages is trended, so we can actually look back at it historically for a month or a year. Next slide, please. So then some of our lessons learned. Automate as many tickets as possible. You don't want to over automate, but you definitely want to automate as many things as you can once you find out what is causing that issue. Create a plan for incorporating new equipment. Try to make it easier for yourself down the road. Maybe oversize the controller if necessary, just so that you can bring on as much stuff as you want later. We also found it very important to group locations into similar buckets for comparison. When you have 700 stores, comparing them all to each other just does not work. But I do recommend keeping them no smaller than 30, just to keep normal distributions. Ensure robust data flow from the start. We brought our IT team in at the very beginning to ensure that we had a data flow in place when we were starting the installation, rather than at the back end when we already had all this data and wouldn't have been able to have any actionable plans. And then identify low-hanging fruit to build your case for further exploration. When you get wins at the front, people will have more buy-in for a little bit more smaller issues that come up later. So that's a big lesson that we learned as well. Next slide, please. So just some of the future plans that we plan to work on. So we are looking into peak load management to lower our capacity and transmission costs. We are able to do this through the control of the HVAC that we have. Nighttime setbacks, raise or lower the temperature set points at night. Not as many people are in there, so we don't need to necessarily keep it at the same temperatures. Equipment degradation analysis. Right now, we kind of just maintain the equipment, make sure that it runs, but is there a certain point for some piece of equipment where it makes more sense to just install a new one from an energy perspective? We're also looking to improve our electric submetering to get it a little bit more robust, pick up some more equipment, find more insight. And then AI controlled HVAC, just trying to get the best possible control system on our HVAC. Having the BMS allows us to put other things on top of it. So that's something that we are currently looking into and hopeful of in the future. And then we're going to continue auditing with bringing in more information, more data, learning the lessons that we have so far. We're hopeful that we can find even more issues and find them before it even reaches an automated ticket. And then we're also looking at water meters. This will allow us to bring in another component of utilities, read that data, and find a leak before it even enters the bills. And now I'll pass it back to Nora for the Q&A. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you, Devin. And thank you, Annie. Thanks to both of you for your presentations. And if you have not already, please join us over at slido.com with the event code #DOE to submit and upvote your questions. Okay, so Annie and Devin, I'll just kind of pass it to each of you to answer these questions. We have a lot coming in, which is great. It means people are actually listening and they're engaged, so I love to see it. So the first question is, do utilities offer incentives for this technology? And maybe I'll pass that to Annie because you mentioned incentives in your presentation.
Yeah, we are hoping to find something that one of the utilities would offer incentives for. We actually have 2 utilities that provide electric service within our county. We have our standard Pacific Gas and Electric, and then we also have a CCA. So we're a little bit early to determine exactly which incentive could work because we're not sure what product we're going to land on, but we're hoping so. One of the other things that there may be an incentive for, depending on how we approach the program, would be behavioral change type of incentives. So that's all forthcoming. We're a little bit early yet, but we also know that Berkeley Lab will support us with that effort too.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. The next question is, what's the typical payback ROI for adding this type of RTU controls? I'll give just a little bit of background that I know. So for UC Davis, they measured 8 buildings after they installed controls and did a before and after. They saw an average payback of around 3 years, but it really just depends on how the building is operating currently to capture the payback. So for example, they found many buildings that were running 24/7. Those buildings had a great payback because they were able to turn off the HVAC when no one was in the building, but there's definitely a range. So Devin, maybe I'll start with you. Can you talk about how you're tracking the savings in your buildings?
Yeah, so previously we didn't really have too much information sites outside of just the energy use, so that's what we've been using. We just track KWH. If you use the utility bills, that can vary just based on rates. So we found a 10% decrease in energy use annually. So we calculate our ROI just under 3, just about that 3-year mark is where we see it come in.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Devin. And that is something that we are trying to gather as part of the campaign. We're going to collect data from participants so we can actually give better numbers for payback and ROI and just have more evidence for those savings. Annie, do you all have any plans to track data so that you're able to calculate that ROI?
Absolutely. I know our leadership is very interested in this as well. So yeah, we will be, once we determine what a solution is, we will be setting a baseline period. We have a cloud-based energy management software in which we can pull all of our utility data from our bills. So we'll set a baseline period, and then we'll test it during the pilot phase as well to see what we're anticipating. But then post pilot phase, looking into a longer term scaling, we'll also have a benchmarking period, or a post project measuring period as well.
That's great. So the next question is for Devin. What technology is Sheets using to monitor the kilowatt hours for your rooftop units?
Yeah, so we use a device called an e-gauge. We use CTs and Rogowski coils to connect to that. And then the data is just sent straight from that through a converter so that it speaks back net. We're looking into other options such as smart breakers, but right now it's the e-gauge.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm just doing a quick look because I've seen a couple related questions for Devin. Someone asked about what type of lighting controls you have. Do you have any capabilities? And are you doing any demand controlled ventilation given the varied occupancy of your stores?
Yeah, so demand controlled ventilation, we do not do, just based on how much we have to export from our kitchen. Our engineers had said it's just not going to be possible. For lighting controls, we only really have controls on the exterior. Interior is basically always on other than a few areas with occupancy sensors. So it's sunrise, sunset, and then there's also a photo cell connected for the exterior. So if the sunlight drops a little too low that we don't like it, we're going to turn on some security lights just for everybody's safety.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For the next question, I'll jump back to Annie. This one on the screen is, can you talk more about the planned occupant education?
Yeah, great question. So this is something we are still pondering how we want to approach. And if you manage facilities with occupants in it, you'll understand that there is a little delicacy between what information you're opening up to the occupants of the facility and how you as a building manager respond to that. So when we talked with UC Davis, they developed something that they called thermostat, and their thermostat program, if you will, was something where they would have building occupants log onto a dashboard and they could respond very simply. Are you comfortable with the temperature? Smiley face, neutral face, frown face. And that helped UC Davis kind of figure out the different temperature set points. I think something like that could possibly work with our occupants. We all are familiar with occupants going up to the thermostat and cranking the up button, cranking the down button, and thinking that it has some sort of significant effect. So I think we're going to need to be really mindful with how we approach the occupant satisfaction. But one of the things that we do hope to do with this program is adjust our set points a little bit. And the concept of the thermostat dashboard, I think, would be something that would be fairly easy for us to implement. And maybe just one last note for anybody that's considering this: we have our traditional utility, we have our CCA. In California, we also have things called RENs, Regional Energy Networks, and our REN has expressed interest in helping us design a behavior occupant education program. So I think once we get through maybe the first pilot phase of actually figuring out the product itself, I'll work with the REN to develop some sort of occupant education.
Great, thank you, Annie. So for this next question, I will jump back to Devin. And you talked a little bit about the platform that you use, and you had the flow chart of how the data gets into your dashboards. But can you actually answer this question? Does Sheets have a specialist who developed and maintains the Tableau dashboards? Is it internal, or do you use a consultant?
Yeah, so to answer kind of both of those, the BAS that we use is ALC. And then for the Tableau dashboard, we have our own internal. He's great. His name's Levi Love. Does a great job and build all of that out. So he developed, he maintains it. He has a lot of other ones that we use as well. That was just the best one that I felt to share for this.
That's great. Shout out to Levi for his amazing dashboards. Okay, so the next question I will ask, I guess, both of you. How did the building control type baseline information get compiled? Utility bills, utility participation, or survey? So Annie, maybe I will start with you, because I think the second question below that is also for you, because they asked, what is the square footage difference in controlled versus uncontrolled buildings? So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how did you get that baseline data, and then what are those differences between the buildings that are not currently controlled, where you're looking to install thermostats, and the buildings that were already on a central BMS?
Okay, so we have about, I'm going to say about, to cover myself here, 831,000 square feet of facilities that have building controls in them already, and about 696,000 square feet of buildings that do not have controls. So the way that the baseline data for those two figures that I just gave you was derived was through the utility bills. As I said, we have a cloud-based energy management software, and that data gets pushed through by an electronic script directly from the utility bill. So that information feeds directly into the cloud management software. We can pull various reports. We could also, if we wanted, get the more granular data directly from the utilities portal. But for us, having monthly data is fine for that. I think I forgot what the rest of that question was.
Well, generally you answered both. So we were asking,
okay,
how did the baseline information get controlled? But you could talk a little bit more about the difference between your buildings that are controlled and not. Like, are the smaller buildings just more spread out? And give us like a general idea of the differences.
Yeah, so we have, it's kind of interesting because the facilities that we have building controls in right now are who you'd normally think of. You know, we have a 4-story government building. We have other types of office facilities that have multiple floors, and those have building controls on them. The county also has a jail, so that has building controls. But then we also have a couple things that surprised me in our data with what has controls in it already. We have, a fire station that's 6,000 square feet that has controls. We have a health facility that's 10,000 square feet and has controls. So it's not only small facilities that have controls, but I would say it's primarily the larger facilities that have the building controls. And the buildings that don't have controls on them right now are who you typically expect: small facilities, small office type facilities, and sort of all far-flung parts of the county. But most of the county's geographical populations are within like very specific areas. So most of these facilities are within these very specific areas.
Okay, thanks, Annie. And I'll stick to one question at a time now, because Slido also doesn't like when I ask you two questions at once. We can only highlight one. So I will ask a question to you, Devin. First of all, they said, thanks, Devin, very interesting. So there's a compliment there. And the question is Sheets using this data and process as a part of sustainability initiatives and commitments? If so, how?
Yeah, so right now we don't have any commitments. We're currently working on them and hope to have them in place in the future. But we do plan to incorporate some of the data, specifically the energy data. If we incorporate certain projects, we can show that we use less energy, and from that, we also use less carbon. So we do plan on it in the future. We just need to work out some of the sustainability initiatives and goals that we'd like to do.
Great, thanks, Devin. And while I have you, one other question, just as a follow-on. Someone asked about your plans to incorporate water meters, and they're just interested for you to just speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when it comes to water bills, obviously they're monthly, a lot of them are quarterly. So you can end up with a leak that's going on for months and months and months. If it's underground, there's no way to completely know for sure from an eyesight standpoint. So with the water meters, we'll be able to get real-time data, basically daily summaries, and say, okay, our water's definitely up, and we can take action on it. We've also found that certain pieces of equipment are maintained certain ways, and we believe with the water meter, we'll be able to see pressure differences and maybe change how we replace that piece of equipment to share a little, to save a little bit of money in the long term.
Great, thanks, Devin. And I'll give you two a break, and I will answer this next question. The next one is, I'm not sure I understand the difference between the concept of small building controls versus a standard BMS like Sheets was showing. Sheets was using a major BMS company. How is this campaign different than just install controls? Wow, that's a great question. So the goal of this campaign is, yes, to install controls. And when we say that, it could be from a major BMS company, or it could be from a smaller company that just offers smart thermostats. At the end of the day, we are just trying to encourage small and medium building owners and operators to have better control over their buildings. And the reason that this campaign is different is because we're focusing on those smaller buildings. Some of you may be familiar with a campaign that ended in 2019 called the Smart Energy Analytics Campaign. That was another DOE campaign about installing controls, energy management and information systems, things like that. There's a lot of overlap between when we say BMS or smart thermostat or energy information system. And that's part of what we're trying to do with some of our resources. So for example, I mentioned a product listing where we highlighted the different capabilities from controls vendors. And you can see in there that some of them we actually consider a light building automation system. So it may not have as much capability as some of those bigger vendors, but you can still do a lot with it on your small buildings, like what Devin has done in their buildings. They've controlled other end uses such as lighting. So hopefully that answers your question, but at the end of the day, the goal is to install controls in these small buildings. Okay, now I'm going to kick it to Annie. The question here is, did you consider the controls vendor that your other large buildings used for BMS?
Yeah, so I'll answer that, but I just want to tack something onto the end of that question. I think that's a great question. And yeah, it is just kind of install controls, but I can tell you what the rationale was for our local government. Like I said, we have a pretty robust facility maintenance team. We have a really robust facility planning team as well. And for us, the major benefit of doing something like this is doing it all at once, right? Because, we work for local government, we have all of the projects that are in front of us, we know what the needs are for facilities, but there was never a need to actually take a step back and look at our portfolio holistically and say, what are we missing from these smaller facilities? Sure, we have thermostats in them, but we don't actually know what's happening in a facility. So we don't know if the rooftop units are running as efficiently as they can. We don't even really know if the occupant is happy with what's going on in the facility until we get a work order. So for us, it was actually taking a concerted effort to prioritize what's happening in our facilities and then hopefully get some visibility and control over what's going on. And from an incentive point of view, being able to say, hey, we're going on this program where we're going to be addressing 60 to 100 facilities. Here's what our roadmap looks like. Is attractive to them because, again, this is maybe in concept a simple thing for a local government or an organization to do. It's just not something that's a priority for most, at least not for us. And it also provides one last thing. So it also provides, in my opinion, a value add for maintenance as well, because if we're able to go into a facility and we know we're going to be installing smart controls there, we also have the opportunity to say, is there anything else that maintenance wants here? Do they want a CO2 sensor here? Do we want economizers here? So if there's any other way that we could improve the facility while we're already there, I think that's another benefit. So to the question directly then, did you consider controls vendors for your other large building? Yes, absolutely. And I will say that is a very important thing for us to consider, especially from our facility maintenance perspective. We want to make sure that we're being sensitive to vendors that we have relationships with. Our mechanics are in these facilities. They know how to already control and manage the products that are in the vendors. So they were also considered as part of this effort.
Great, thank you, Annie. One question I wanted to address that I think would be directed to me is, would this outreach, education, and technical assistance campaign be appropriate for a campus that includes a school, residential property, small office building, a church, and an extracurricular building? Yes, so if these buildings do not currently have controls and you're looking for support on installing those, then please reach out and join our campaign. If you're not ready to join, you can send an email to our email address, and then we will be sure to answer any of your questions. So thank you for that one. All right, this next question is going to Devin. People are very interested in EV chargers at Sheets. I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't know the answer to this one, but why don't you speak to that one, Devin?
Yeah, so we actually already have EV chargers on a lot of our sites. We're closing in on 100 stores with EV charging. As far as energy monitoring them, that depends on a lot of factors, but they all will always be energy monitored. It's just a question of who is monitoring them based on who owns them.
That's a very, very good point, Devin. Can you talk a little bit more about that decision of who is responsible for monitoring the chargers?
So there's multiple different options. The charging company itself can own it, such as Tesla. So they're the owner operator. They have a separate transformer that provides energy just to them. It's not on our meter, so they pay that bill. They're responsible for the monitoring, upkeep, everything along those. If there was one that we owned, then we would be responsible for all of that, and then we would monitor that energy. As far as how that decision goes, I'm not on that side, and I don't know how much they want to share as far as that's concerned.
Right. Thanks, Devin. Yeah, it's interesting to know there are all these different options because people may not understand all the metering and who pays for what. So I will go back to Annie and ask about, so you've sent out all of your vendor forms. You said you're going to look back and compile all of those responses and then do some product demonstrations. So this question asks, who will be attending those product demonstrations?
Yeah, great question. And I see the next question, which is how long do we anticipate the scoring and piloting? So maybe I'll try to wrap them up in one answer. So we will start our scoring. Well, we've already started our scoring behind the scenes. Some of us have, but we will sit down as a team, the one I represented on the slide, and we will review all of the information that came in. I am hoping that we can accomplish it in one very long meeting that will have lunch provided, but we'll see how much we get through next week. We might have to have another scoring session. But once we get through a scoring session or two, we will have our top vendors who we will then reach out to either, get more information if anyone's lacking or receive the demonstrations. The demonstrations will include our team that we have, but I think it would be prudent for us to involve a few more of the maintenance technicians that deal with the rooftop units themselves, because they're going to be the ones who are accessing the software and the equipment every day. So I would want to make sure that if we're doing any type of demonstrations, that they have the opportunity to be there and ask any questions that they'd like. And then for how long the pilot phase will take, that's a really great question. We will pilot the solution at least for 3 months in a facility. And that's based off UC Davis's recommendation of how long it took for them to pilot. I do anticipate that we will do one pilot where we test a few products in different facilities, and from there we'll be able to make a decision. But worst comes to worst, we can then go back to the table and kind of reset on a pilot again. So at least 3 months for controls installed within the facilities, but maybe 6 months to just get a better baseline.
Great, thanks, Annie. The next question, it says for Annie, but I'm actually going to ask both of you, and I will start with Devin. So how do you motivate your facilities maintenance staff to be more proactive? And I might expand it a little bit. They're asking about selecting the correct equipment, but on your end, Devin, I'm curious, who is actually working with the RTUs, and are they involved in looking at the data you have in Tableau, things of that nature?
Yeah, so we have a very robust maintenance team all in-house here. So who we work with is the managers of that maintenance team. We brought them in from the very beginning to ensure that what we were choosing was best for what they wanted to do and how we currently operate. As far as how to monitor the audits and everything, we just set up a weekly meeting with them. We show them the savings that we could see from the energy side, and the problems that we bring, they very clearly can see based on the data, so they know that there are issues. So I think just making it easy and very, colorful to understand, they can't really ignore it. And we all want the same thing, to have everything running as efficiently as possible. So it makes it easy once you come with the proof.
Makes sense. And now I'm realizing we are almost at time, but I will let Annie speak to this question. Aside from providing free lunch, how are you motivating your staff to be involved in this conversation?
That's the only way. No, well, kind of tying on to that last question too, I don't really think our facilities maintenance staff needs to be motivated, because this is a tool that they're going to use. I think if anything, they need to be reminded that if there's extra things that they want besides smart controls, we can add them. I mean, this is a pilot. So if we want to add in additional sensors or some type of component for the equipment, we can do that. That's what this is all about. So luckily, our organization sees the benefits in a potential reduction in work orders, the visibility and control of our facilities, and the potential for energy savings. So everybody is on board and doesn't need too much convincing, but lunch helps.
That's great. Thank you, Annie. Well, with that, we will jump back to the slides since we are almost at time here. So just a reminder, if you're interested in signing up, you can email us or go to our website. Next slide. And then just a little plug for the webinar series. There's lots of great things coming up. You can see at the bottom here, you can register today at the website. Next slide. And then this is our next upcoming webinar, Enhancing Building Envelope Performance with the Building Envelope Campaign. So you can learn about another campaign if you register for this webinar. Next slide. Okay, and if you all have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to that. Annie and Devin have graciously offered their personal emails, so you can reach out to them directly, but I'm also happy to direct any of these questions. So thank you all for attending today. We appreciate it. Take care.